Good Shabbos, everyone. It's good to see so many of you here today and see some people I haven't seen in a while. It's always a pleasure. I wish everyone a good Shabbos again. And as mentioned earlier, we started our last book of the Torah today, the Book of Deuteronomy. It's a sign of things to come as we enter this last book. And we know the holidays are not too far off in the distance. But we have some important lessons to learn before we can get there, before we can finish the Torah, before Moses can finish his story, before Moses can finish his charge of preparing the people. And one of the goals that Moses has in this last book of the Torah is to recount some of the stories, some of the experiences, good and bad, that the people have had in the Sinai desert in the 40 years from going from Egypt to the land of Israel. As I mentioned, sometimes he'll bring up good things and sometimes he'll bring up not so good things, but always with the lesson in mind. If Moses is going to bring up something bad that happened, there's a reason for it. So here Moses seems to trick us, if you will. And I want to see if you guys can catch it right here at the beginning. So let me take you back a few weeks ago from the story of the spies. You probably remember the story. Moses sends 12 spies to scout out the land of Israel. And out of the 12 spies, how many come back saying that the people can do it? Only 2, right? Joshua and Caleb. 10 of the spies say, you know what? It's a pretty good land. God's not been lying to us this whole time. It's beautiful. The fruit's really big. It's a really cool place. But the people are humongous. They're huge. We're like grasshoppers in their eyes. There's no way we can take over this land. And so hearing this from 10 of the spies, as you can imagine, the people freak out. Take us back to Egypt. You know, things weren't so bad in Egypt. So what's the punishment? You can't go, right? God is so incensed, God is so mad that they believe these 10 spies that whole generation is deemed to die in the desert, except for 2 people. Who are those 2 people? Joshua and Caleb, the 2 spies who say, you know what, we can do it. So at the top box of your page, everyone get the study page? And if you're watching us online, you can go on our website. We posted it there right below the video player and also in the comments section of our Facebook and YouTube. Right here at the very top, in the very wilderness, your carcasses drop. Of all you who were recorded in your various lists from the age of 20 years up, you have muttered against me. Not one shall enter the land in which I swore to settle you, save Caleb and Joshua. In this episode of the spies, God swears that only Caleb and Joshua enter the land. Neither of those people are named Moses or Aaron. So here's the problem, because this is what we read this morning. Now look at the third box. This is Moses saying, I approved of the plan. He's talking about the spy story. He's reminding them of what happened. And so I select 38 years earlier. And so I selected 12 of your men, 1 from each tribe. They made for the hill country, came to the Wadi Eshkol, and spied it out. Yet you refused to go up and flouted the command of the Lord your God. Because of you, the Lord was incensed with me too, and he said, you shall not enter it either. So what's the problem with what Moses just said to the people? What's the fundamental problem? What is Moses saying here in this third box in what we read this morning? Moses is saying, I can't go into the land of Israel because you were freaked out by what the spies said. So I was punished because of that. But what's the problem? What was the story where Moses was punished for entering the land? Hitting the rock, right? So what's going on here? Why is Moses forgotten why he was punished? Right, you remember the story of God tells Moses, look, I understand the people are thirsty. Go talk to a rock. Water will gush out. The people will be fine. What does Moses do instead? He hits the rock. He calls the people rebels. And so immediately afterwards, God tells Moses, you've crossed the line. You're not the type of leader I need anymore, and you can't even go into the land of Israel. You can take the people all the way up to the land of Israel, but you can't go in. But here, what is Moses saying? What's the reason for his punishment? The spy story. So what's going on here? Is Moses in old age forgotten what happened? Or is there a reason why Moses is saying this? Indeed, this analysis is backed up by Moses' words in Devarim. He states that he was blocked from entering the land because of the spies, not because of the hitting of the rock incident. So Moses and Aaron sinned during the spy story. What did they do wrong? The Torah leaves us a hint by telling us about the two people who didn't mess up, Caleb and Joshua. Let's compare their actions to those of Moses and Aaron. So if Moses did make a mistake in the spy story, what was that grave mistake that would bar him from entering the land of Israel? What could it have been that was so awful that Moses is now recounting? Because back when we were reading these stories, we were never told. In fact, we were told Moses couldn't enter the land because he hit the rock. So let's go back to the spy story for a moment. Numbers 14, 5 through 9. The people, are, as I mentioned, are freaking out. Oh my God, take us back to Egypt. 10 of the spies are saying we can't do it. We're weaklings. We don't have faith in God. We'd rather die as slaves in Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembled congregation of the Israelites. They fall on their faces in prayer. But Joshua and Caleb, what's their response to the people? Of those who had scattered the land, rent their clothes, and exhorted the whole Israelite community. The land that we traversed and scouted is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us to that land, a land that flows with milk and honey, and give it to us. Only you must not rebel against the Lord. Have no fear then of the people of the country, for they are our prey. Their protection has departed from them, but the Lord is with us. Have no fear of them. So what's the difference between Moses and Aaron's reaction to the people versus Joshua and Caleb? What's the difference? Lack of faith, maybe? Lack of courage, perhaps, right? Leadership, right? This is Moses and Aaron. I mean, these are our leaders. And what are they doing? Prayer is not a bad thing. Trust me, I'm a rabbi. I want you to pray. But all they do is pray. But Joshua and Caleb don't just pray. In 2 words, I would say, they take action, right? They exhort the people. They don't just fall on their faces and pray. They tell the people, guys, what are you thinking? You can do this. Look at all these miracles God's done for us. And you're going to cry like babies? Get a grip, right? Man up, woman up, right? I mean, you can do this. That's the difference. Moses and Aaron don't stand up to B'nai Yisrael. They simply fall on their faces, seemingly in prayer. But Caleb and Joshua have the courage to go against the tide and take action. They try to convince the children of Israel, B'nai Yisrael, to believe in God, to continue on their way to Eretz Yisrael, while Moses and Aaron do nothing to stop the people. That's a real indictment of Moses and Aaron. Have they lack the courage? Have they burnt out on their leadership roles? Now here's something interesting too, because the rabbis say, wait a second, and you might be asking, wait a second, Rabbi, isn't it necessary to pray to God in a desperate situation? Why are Moses and Aaron's actions viewed negatively? So turn the page. Let me take you back to another important story. What's happening here in Exodus 14:15? This is right before the sea is about to be split. They've just left Egypt. You know the Passover story. The Egyptian army is behind them. Pharaoh's catching up. They're trying to get out of Egypt, and all of a sudden, there's the Sea of Reeds. They don't have time to build boats, right? Looks like Pharaoh's going to come back, get them, and bring them back to Egypt. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward. And you lift up your rod and hold your arm over the sea and split it, so that the Israelites may march into the sea on dry ground." On the banks of the Red Sea, with the Egyptians closing in on them, Moses and B'nai Yisrael pray to God. God's response? Stop praying, start doing. Moses should have known this from before. This attitude is summed up in the maxim, Ein smochim al hanes. We do not rely on miracles, but instead we must do as much as we humanly can and ask that God help us from there. Thus, Moses and Aaron's main sin was they did not stand up to the people when they rebelled, particularly when viewed through the lens of settlement in the land of Israel, which entailed a lessening of miracles and divine intervention. This lack of zeal was a fatal flaw. Right? Moses should have known prayer is not enough. It takes more. As Jews, we can't just rely on prayer. Prayer is a good start. Prayer is a fundamental part of what it means to be a Jew. But as I always try to remind people, I mentioned this last Friday night in my sermon. As Jews, prayer is not where we stop. In fact, if you come to services, you come to a Shabbat service like this, and you feel like you did enough. I prayed, I went to services, which is good. Trust me, I want you to come. Come every week. But that's not where it stops. The Judaism doesn't stop when you leave those doors. You come to prayer so that you're more inspired to go out now every day of the week and take action. Prayer is where you gather the strength to go out and do things that God wants us to do. Prayer is where we learn what we could be doing more of to make and bring God's passion and God's divine providence and God's laws and God's goodness to this world. Remember, prayer is not about bringing God here down to earth. It's about bringing us up to God. And we can only do so when we leave these doors and take what we were inspired by to go out and work with our hands. Judaism is not just a religion of the heart. It's also, and probably more so, a religion of the hands. I always tell people, if they ask, Rabbi, what's the most important phrase in the entire Talmud? And it's based, I think, in this idea, don't rely on miracles. The rabbis say, even the most righteous person of all should not walk by palm trees on a windy day. What are the rabbis saying when they say that? Even the most righteous person should not walk by palm trees on a windy day. No matter how righteous you are, that palm branch could fall and kill you. Don't rely on a miracle. Don't be stupid. You could be the best Jew ever. You could do all the commandments. If you jaywalk across 610, you're an idiot, right? Don't rely on a miracle. No matter how good of a person you are, right? No matter how much you pray, you still have to put your seatbelt on. Drive the speed limit. Don't text while you're driving, right? Be careful. Don't rely on miracles, right? It's still a world in which prayer elevates us, but it's not all about just prayer. It's also you have to take actions. You can't rely on God doing. Moses and Aaron perhaps have forgotten this, and thus it's time for a change. So let me end with this middle box that I think has a great and important lesson for us, whether it's for us as leaders, whether we're leaders in our offices or at home or in our community, and I think an important lesson for the type of leaders that we should look for. Because maybe Moses realized he can no longer be the leader of the people, but perhaps he was trying to change. Because in this book of Devarim, in this last book, he's trying to prepare the people for what type of leaders they will need. Rabbi Sachs writes, may he rest in peace, if someone who knew nothing about Judaism were to ask you for a single book that would explain both who Jews are and why they do what they do, the best answer would be Devarim. No other book so encapsulates and dramatizes all the key elements of Judaism as a faith and a way of life. In a much-watched TED Talk and a book with the same name, and I highly recommend this TED Talk. I've shown it to my staff here. I highly recommend it. Simon Sinek says that the transformative leaders are those who start with why. More poetically, it said by this poet, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people together to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Through the addresses we read in the book of Devarim, Moses gave the people their why. They see God's people, the nation on whom he has set his love, the people he rescued from slavery and gave in the form of the commandments, the constitution of liberty. They may be small, but they are unique. They are the people who in themselves testify to something beyond themselves. They are the people whose fate will defy the normal laws of history. Maybe Moses can't do it anymore, but he understands the importance of giving the people the reason to go out and take action. It starts with why. Why take Jewish actions? It's not about do. It's why am I doing this? I encourage you to read that quote from David Ben-Gurion. And then I also encourage you, it's a great podcast I've been listening to over the last several months. It's called Post-Corona with Dan Senor. And every week and a half or so, he releases a new episode dealing with how this pandemic has changed us as a society. And last week, he interviewed Yuval Levin, who talks a lot about the lack of leadership and the importance of the type of leaders we should be looking for in America today as we build a new world in the post-pandemic society that we will be trying to build. So with that, I wish everybody a good Shabbos. And I'm now going to turn it back over to our congregational president, David Stein, who is going to lead us in Musaf. And so we rise and we turn to page 184.